Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review The Old Man and the Gun, which is starring Robert Redford, and this is directed and written by David Lowery, who in recent years he made a Ghost Story that came out, and he also made the remake of Peach Dragon, which I saw and absolutely loved, and actually has a very similar kind of old-timey, kind of nostalgic vibe as this film did. And Robert Redford was in that, and he's in this, and this is supposedly Robert Redford's last on-screen performance, which he went out in a very entertaining way. This is a very enjoyable, entertaining film, and I loved it. Like, I'm not gonna say like this was the most profound film, but it was a really fun time. It was a really entertaining time, and David Lowery does a really good job of creating an atmosphere in this film and a feeling. You feel like you're plopped into like the early 80s, kind of like out in the Midwest, middle of nowhere America, and you get that vibe, and you've had this feeling that it's like you're in this time period. And I'll talk a little bit about the cinematography because that really fits in too, because Joe Anderson, who's a cinematographer, made this very grainy and made this feel like a film that was made in that time period. And it was really inspired and really helped create the atmosphere that Lowery was trying to create. And in terms of emotional feeling, it's like everyone's in this film, it's just like you just get this connection to them and they feel very real, and you do have these feelings for them and you care about them. And it's very interesting because you have like the good guys and the bad guys. You have the cops in this, you have these robbers, and it's kind of like you see things very much from each of their perspectives, where it's like, are there really any like bad guys in this movie or antagonists? It kind of feels like you really get this connection with both sides through Robert Redford's character Forrest and Casey Affleck's character John Hunt, and you really get to build these relationships with them and build emotional connections to them. And in terms of storytelling wise, there's little subtle things about how the story is told as you're going through, and something might be told to you and they slip in little pieces of scenes that are happening in the future or coming up, and it just feels very natural, and it's a nice way of shaking things up from just being a straightforward narrative. And I really appreciated that, and that's just something subtle and effective that Lowery was able to bring to this film. And in terms of pacing, like, this isn't like a high octane like robbery film, this heist film. This isn't like Heat. This is something that is just like you're building these connections with these people, and that's what really matters. And like, to be perfectly honest, when it comes down to these bank robberies, it's more of a character trait than like a plot point, where it's like you really get to understand this character Forrest and his feeling of he needs us to feel alive. And that's why it's in the film, because it's like this is more about this older gentleman who's dealing with his point in his life and what drives his life and what brings him happiness. And you get the same basic kind of thing through Casey Affleck's character as well, to the point where this film really is about these two men and trying to find what gives them purpose and understand that. And when you really get through to the story which David Lowery paints in this film, is you have these two men kind of on their own trajectories, and then very smoothly integrates with each other. And there's a really impressive sequence in this film where you're really having this heartfelt moment for John Hunt and his wife, and you're building this connection with his family, and like they go out and it so seamlessly intertwines with this other thread of Robert Redford's character Forrest and Sissy Spacek's character Jewel, who he's a bit smitten with, and building this relationship. And I really appreciated how well these two stories thread so well together and really create a cohesive tale of two men basically trying to figure out the same thing and like what really drives you in life. And it's a very interesting ride figuring out where these two men wind up and what really drives them. And It may surprise you, it might not. This isn't like I mentioned before, this isn't like a super profound, super deep kind of film, but I feel like it does a really good job and is crafted well enough to be able to show where these two men are coming from and where things wind up for them. And also where the women in their lives fit in too. And I'll get to talking about the performances, but across the board, these performances were fantastic. And the characters in this film, like you have Robert Redford's two pals, Teddy and Waller, who are played by Danny Glover and Tom Waits, and they each had their little moments of like telling tales and stuff like that, which I appreciated. That's how you got to know their characters a little bit based off of their stories. And there's one in particular that Tom Waits tells about how he hates Christmas, and it was a fun story, and like that kind of stuff really builds character in this film, and that makes it a little more enjoyable than being like, I like this, I don't like this kind of thing, and it's just spewed out for you. And I think that's talented writing on Lowry's part in terms of building this story. And the music, Daniel Hart does a really good job of using jazz, honestly, as a score, and that really works. And it's very beautiful and nice music that goes along and gives a nice vibe and helps build the atmosphere of this film. And there's some other song choices that like really got caught in my head. Not gonna lie, I put a couple of songs in my Amazon music because of this film, because I really enjoyed the songs in it and I thought they were used very well in this film. In terms of performances, Robert Redford is ridiculously charming. He's just spewing charisma, and he has fantastic chemistry with Sissy Spacek, who also does a great job. And then Casey Affleck's kind of like, he's got this grumpy cat vibe. There's parts where he just looks like a bit of a grump. And honestly, it's like his character building back up his relationship, it seems like, with his family, trying to balance his work life and what drives him. And his wife, played by Tika Sumpter, who was fantastic, and she was really charming and supportive, and they had great chemistry. One of the best things I can say about this film is everybody did their jobs in terms of acting so well in this film that you really feel it, and they feel like real people. And I think that's something that makes this film really special, is that you build that connection with them because they feel real. And just some other things sprinkled through. There's one particular sequence where you get to hear about all the times that Forrest, the main character, escapes from prison, and how they portray that was really great. And there's just different kinds of things in this film that are very subtle storytelling elements and tools on how they did that just really worked for me. And like, I'm not going to say this is like top tier film of the year for me, because I felt like it didn't really hit super deep or like big messages like a lot of some other films that came out this year. But this was definitely one of the most enjoyable experiences I had in a theater this year. And this is definitely something that I would recommend across the board, because has something for everybody. It's really sweet. It's like an hour and a half too, so it's kind of like it's a nice little romp. I had a nice date. It was a nice little evening. Highly recommend. Go check out The Old Man and the Gun, and thank you as always for supporting your Wasteland reviewer.